and the country found them ready at the stirring call for men. Let no tears add to their hardships as the soldiers pass along. And although your heart is breaking, make it sing this cheery song. Keep the home fires burning while your hearts are yearning.
Hello and welcome to this somewhat special edition of Reflections here on BBC Radio Cambridgeshire. 70 years ago an armistice was signed and thus ended what had been called the war to end all wars. It didn't, of course, and realistically there was never any chance that it would be, but it was the start of a ritual which is still enacted all over Great Britain and in many other countries on a Sunday early in November to celebrate the end of those hostilities. As the years have passed, men, and indeed some ladies, wearing the 1914-15 star, the British War Medal, the Victory Medal, and other associated decorations have gathered at war memorials up and down the land to do homage to those who weren't able to come back. As the years have passed, those principal characters of so long ago have gradually left the stage to be replaced by those whose war is still within living memory. With their passing, names like Passchendaele, the Somme, Loos, Ypres have vanished into the swirling mists of history. They all saw and participated in heroism, the details of which in most cases have passed away with them. But there are still a few with us, and my guest this week is one such man. He joined me last year as a straightforward guest on the programme. On this, the 70th anniversary of the armistice, it's my pleasure and privilege to be in his company once again. He's Stewart Jordan from Hauxton, and sitting with him by his fireside, I asked him first where and when he was born.
I was born on the 22nd of September 1892 at number 21 Blackheath Rise, Blackheath in southeast London.
And in your lifetime, how many monarchs have you seen altogether, do you know?
Let me see. Queen Victoria, Edward VII, George V, George VI, Queen Elizabeth.
You've not missed many then, have you?
No, I haven't missed any.
Tell me where you were when the 1914 war was declared.
I was actually in Liverpool. I was on my way, or the boat trip around England and Scotland. We got to Liverpool the night war was declared, and we all had to go on shore, and we were put up for 2 or 3 nights in a hotel there.
So how did you come to join? Where did you join?
Well, when I managed to get back to London, I found that my brother, younger than I am, had already joined the London Scottish. After I left our school, they started an officers' training corps, which he joined, and so he had 2 or 3 years training. And when he joined up, he was put straight away into the 1st Battalion because they needed to make it up to strength. So I decided to join the London Scottish too, although I had a hankering after joining the cavalry.
Why did you want to join the cavalry?
I've always been rather fond of horses, and I think it was perhaps laziness. I should soon be riding on a horse than trudging along on foot.
In hindsight, would that have been a good idea, do you think?
No, I don't think it would, because finally when the poor old cavalry were put into action, they had an awful time of it.
How long did it take to recruit a battalion?
Oh, it's difficult to say, but not more than perhaps 4 weeks.
Why do you think there was this quickness?
Well, I think everybody felt, that the Kaiser had been so treacherous, and they felt they'd got to do something about it.
Where did you train?
First of all, at Dorking. We were in billets there, and we used to go out marching and Form 4s and rifle drill and various other things.
Tell me about the inspection that you had with Kitchener.
It was on Epsom Downs, We marched from Dorking to Epsom Downs, and were all lined up. There was a whole brigade of us, and after we'd been waiting for some time, it started to snow. And it snowed and snowed, and there was an absolute blizzard, and after we'd got thoroughly soaked, an order was given to put on our overcoats. So we put on our dry overcoats over our soaked tunics. When Kitchener finally did arrive, goodness knows how late he was, when he passed by us, I just heard him say, "Oh, this is London Scottish, I suppose," and walked on. And that was the inspection.
When did you go to France?
In April 1915.
Can you describe for us, when you got there and, as it were, settled into the dreadful business of the war, tell me something about life in the line.
In parts of the line, it was quiet. We just used to go up there and we'd spend a fortnight in the line, and very, very little happened. A few occasional shells came over and we retaliated and so on. In other parts of the line, it was pretty active. The trenches were probably about 6 feet deep, so that as a man walked along, his head could not be seen above the top. But every now and again, there was what is called a parapet, a little part of the line that was dug out, and a step about 2-3 feet high, on which the lookout could stand and look over the top to see what was happening or whether there's anybody about there. Then on the rear side of the trench, every now and again there were dugouts, places where you could go at night and sleep while one man was on guard.
Let's talk for a moment about the question of the guard. How did he look out without getting killed?
Some of them did get killed, but they had to be very, very careful. You see, they didn't hold their heads up for too long. Their rifle was always over the top like that, so they could hold it. But every now and again, they would pop their head up for a little while like that and down again.
At that sort of stage, how far do you think you would have been from the enemy lines?
Oh, they varied very considerably. In one part, I remember we were very, very close indeed. We could almost hear them talking. On other parts, we might be, half a mile away.
The dugouts that you speak about, was there any sort of furniture in them?
No, nothing at all. Oh, no, you just lay on the bare floor.
And how many of you would be to a dugout?
Half a dozen, probably.
Overseas there came a pleading, help a nation in distress, and we gave our glorious laddies honor bade us do no less. For no gallant son of freedom to a tyrant's yoke should bend, and a noble heart must answer to the sacred call of friend. Keep the home fires burning while your hearts are young.
Let's talk about the question of the hygiene of that arrangement then.
Well, there were what were called latrines. Every now and again there was a little place dug from the trench, and you went there and there was a great big pail, and that's what you used. And at night time, someone was detailed off to take it about 100 yards further back and dig a hole and bury it.
How did you obtain food and water?
Food was brought up by the canteen people. They had these travelling ovens. There was a hot stew, and I think that was about all I can remember.
How often then did you get fed?
Not until the evening, because it wouldn't be safe for them to travel up, you see. But at night when it was dark, these travelling ovens used to come up, and there were 4 dixies full, one for each company, and they were given to the quartermaster sergeants, and they doled them out to the men. We had our little mess tins that we carried, and we had a thing full of stew.
What sort of camaraderie was there within the trenches?
Oh, very good indeed. Oh, there had to be. Oh, yes, we all got on extremely well together. If one man had any trouble, the others would help and all that kind of thing. Oh, yes, very good indeed.
Right, we've touched on the question of the latrines. We've spoken about the food. Let's talk now about the question of keeping clean.
Extremely difficult. There was no question of washing, no question of shaving or anything like that. You went for a whole fortnight without a wash. But I remember on one occasion we were in a very quiet part of the line, and just behind the line there was a lovely little pool of clear water. And one day I thought, I'm going to get in there. And without anybody knowing, I stripped off and popped in and had a little swim and out again before anybody knew.
Were you bothered in any way then by vermin?
Oh, yes, yes. As a matter of fact, we managed to keep fairly clear of them until we went to Loos. We took over from the French. And the first thing we did was to clear out all the filthy straw that they had in their dugouts. And we burnt it at night. And we discovered that it was absolutely full of lice. And from that day on, we caught those lice. It was awfully difficult to get rid of them. I've seen chaps take their tunics off and get a lighted match and run up the seams, burning all the lice as they went. Oh, it's a terrible business.
Can we talk then a little bit about the Battle of Loos? Can you tell me something about that?
Well, we were out of the line about 20 miles back for a week or so before the battle was to start. And our guns bombarded their trenches day and night for a whole week. We could hear it all those miles away, rumbling away, and they never stopped. And then, towards the end of that week, we were moved up just behind the line, and we were told that when we went over the top, it would be a walkover, because our guns had flattened their trenches and our shrapnel had destroyed all the barbed wire that was in front of them. When the day came and the order to get out of our trenches and walk forward, on we went. What happened? The Germans came up from their dugouts, which were about 40 feet deep, brought up their machine guns and their rifles, and when they saw us appearing, walking gently across, pip, 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 they went and just mowed us down. The few who did manage to reach the barbed wire found that it hadn't been destroyed at all, and a whole lot of the poor chaps got tangled up in the barbed wire. It was a shocking shambles.
Have you any way of knowing what percentage of your colleagues were lost in that mess?
I'm afraid that's difficult to say. Quite a lot of them. But some did manage to get through to the German line, and when they did, the Germans just surrendered. Out they came, there's about 100 of them, and up went their arms, and we saw them coming out. We thought the war was over.
The dark cloud inside out till the boys come home.
Can we talk now about the business of listening parties?
Yes, usually two men went out, and their job was to get as close as they could to the German lines so they could hear anything that might appear to be something talking, what they were going to do and that kind of thing, whether anything was going to happen. I remember on one occasion, two men went out, and after a while, one of them came back and told us that the fellow who was with him had been hit by a sniper and was badly wounded and lying on the road that ran between our two lines. So 4 of us volunteered to go out with a stretcher to bring him in. 2 went ahead with the stretcher and 2 were just a little way behind. All of a sudden, the Germans put up a very light. Those were something like a very, very bright firework that hung in the sky for quite a time and lit up the whole place just like daylight. Immediately everybody flopped to the ground flat and covered their heads with their arms, because at that time, immediately the Germans started firing with rifles and machine guns. However, after a while it died down and it was darkness again, so on we went. And we reached the wounded man only to discover that one of our party hadn't arrived with the others. However, there were 3 of us together with the other man who'd been with the wounded man, so that made 4. We got him onto this stretcher and we gradually got him back to our lines, where he was finally taken back to a first aid post and then onto a hospital. Then we went out to search for the man who hadn't come up with us, and we discovered him at last lying where he'd fallen, dead. He had been just a little bit too slow in getting down, and a bullet had hit him in the head, and he was killed. We got back to our lines, reported what had happened, and we heard a few days later that the poor wounded man that we'd just rescued had died in hospital. So his friend had given his life for him in vain.
Tell me, did you ever consider the question of becoming an officer?
Yes, but I turned it down. I was asked on a number of occasions if I would become an officer, but I said no. There were 2 reasons. First of all, my brother, who had gone out with the original battalion, was badly wounded in the first action at Messines, taken prisoner, and died in hospital at Aachen in Germany. The second was that my father married rather late in life. He had a large family, and I was the second eldest. I felt that if anything happened to my father, I was the one who would have to be head of the family and do what I could to help and so on. And the mortality rate of young officers had been so high. You see, in those days, the officers had very distinctive uniform. Their tunics were cut and made for them. They had a collar and tie. Their badges were different. Their sporrans were different. And some of them even carried swords. So that when they went over the top, the German sharpshooters could pick them out immediately, and the mortality rate amongst these young officers was terrific.
I think you've also a story to tell about your involvement in the Battle of the Somme.
Our regiment was on the extreme left of the line, and they had to go over. They had a certain objective. I, with very few others, were fortunate to be kept out of the line that day because we had been in a number of actions and we were kept down with the transport a few miles behind the line under a sort of cliff. And we heard that things were going very badly. And towards the end of the day, when it got dark, we heard that the battalion was to be relieved. And I was selected to go up and lead them back. I had the reputation of being able to see in the dark in those days. In fact, they nicknamed me Old Cat's Eyes. I went up to a crossroads where I was to meet the battalion as it came out of the line. And as I stood there, the Germans started shelling. I noticed a very big, large shell hole, so I dropped down into it for a bit of cover. I'd been there a few minutes when I heard marching feet, so I climbed out, and it was men in kilts. And then I noticed at the head was our adjutant. So I went up to him and I said, "Oh, which company is this?" "Company? This is the battalion." 800 of them went into action, and 100 came back.
The evening hymn and last post played there by the band of Her Majesty's Royal Marines. You're listening to BBC Radio Cambridgeshire, the programme's Reflections, and my guest on this Armistice Sunday edition of the programme is Stewart Jordan. Stewart, did you suffer any injuries during the war?
No, I was very fortunate I didn't. Right towards the end of the war, I got a very slight touch of gas. I was going up the line on my own, I can't think why, and a gas shell came over and landed a few yards from me, and I got a whiff of it. It just helped make me cough and that kind of thing, and I think I've had a very slight weakness all the time, but nothing really to worry about. No, I had no injuries, nothing to really trouble me at all, no illnesses.
So, having gone unscathed, as it were, almost, through the whole war, can you now tell us how you saw the end of it?
Yes, we knew for some little while beforehand that it wasn't far off. One of our signers had been drafted to regimental headquarters, and he got some news to say that the Germans were seriously in retreat. And we knew that because every day we seemed to be marching forward, and then resting and marching forward and so on. And at last the day came, and we were in a little village not far from Mons. And in the morning, the battalion was told to parade, and at 11 o'clock, the adjutant came out and read out a notice to the effect that the Germans had surrendered. There were 3 cheers, and then we went back to billets. And later on in the day, we went for a route march. And that was the end of the war for us.
For no gallant son of freedom to a tyrant's yoke should bend, and a noble heart must answer to the sacred.
And that 1917 edition of Keep the Home Fires Burning by John McCormack brings to a close this Armistice Week edition of Reflections here on BBC Radio Cambridgeshire. My thanks to my guest, Stewart Jordan, a veteran indeed of the First World War. But as usual, my most special thanks to you for listening. Until next week then, do take care. Bye-bye.